Hey, I'm Fred from consolevariations.com. You're listening to Scene World. Enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. This is Scene World. I'm AJ. Joerg is right there.
Yes.
In his Sunday best.
Except it's Monday.
Well, yeah, no one needs to know that. In a minute, we have Rob Hubbard and Chris Abbott, and we're talking about the 8-Bit Symphony. So that's pretty awesome. We've had each of them individually on the podcast talking about Project Hubbard and some of the other stuff that Chris was involved in. But this will be our first time getting them together. So that is very cool.
Exactly. And we'll talk about how it is to make it sound good for symphony.
Yes. Real symphony, like not like, synthesized symphony or something like that. Like an actual symphony with instruments and people and stuff.
Yeah, it's not the first time he did that. He did that also once in 2007 with Run 10 together with Jeroen Tel.
Right, yeah. I remember
that. But of course, it's easier if you only work with your own music.
Yeah, and it is so cool to do it with your own music too, because a lot of times, and we covered with like Dave Lowe and so forth, a lot of times when you write this stuff, you in your mind you hear like this big orchestral thing, and then you do it for the SID, and it's 3 voices, and you have to really pare it down a bit, and so to be able to actually take hear it and put it in a way that you initially imagined it, that is really, really nifty.
Yeah.
So that's in a minute. Before we do that, though, we got a little bit of news to hit on.
Yeah. Super Mario Bros.
Yes.
Was converted to the Commodore 64, and not only stock Commodore 64, but 128 2 megahertz Super CPU, Turbo Chameleon, NTSC-PAL.
It's really and it handles and that's really one of the reasons I think it's so cool
dual
is
SID.
that it handles the dual SIDs. So I've got the SID effects in my 64, and it'll actually see the 2 SIDs. You can set it up to play with the 2 SIDs, so you don't have because the Nintendo has 4 voices, I believe.
Yes.
Though they're locked in what they do, whereas the SID is more flexible in the noises it makes. But it sounds better with the dual SIDs than just with the one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does use. I have tried it on. I've got my 64C hooked up for the most part, and it runs okay on that. There are some slowdowns because, from what I gather, this is like a 1-to-1 port. This is like using the original source code of Super Mario Bros.
Exactly. Yeah.
And of course, the Nintendo is it's a 6502 core, but it's running at 1.7 megahertz, whereas the 64 is running at 1. So
well, for Americans, for Europeans, it's running on 0.98.
It's running at 98 hertz, not even a megahertz, just 98 hertz. But so there's some slowdowns. It does use the 2 megahertz in the borders on the 128. I tried that last night, and it does help with the slowdowns a bit. But yeah, it's really interesting, and it's kind of it's cool to see them squeeze that out of a C64.
Took him 7 years, and he didn't give up on it.
Yeah, which is
it's impressive. Not the first project of its kind. The original project that way was actually Super Mario Bros. For the Mega Drive, and there the coder also used the original source code.
Right.
And wrote a routine to make the music play like on the NES. So it's the same concept.
But the Mega Drive is a lot different as far as the underlying hardware. Because I think it's got a 68,000 in it, doesn't it?
I don't know by heart.
I'll tell you in a second. It's a 68,000 at 7.6 megahertz, and a Z80 at 3.5. So it's a lot different. Whereas this is more of a, I would imagine, more of a straight port as far as the because they're both 65XX beasts, right? But from what I gather too, the graphics capabilities of the C64 are not. The NES is much more suited to doing this than the 64 is, and some of the comments I've seen is that it's sort of a miracle that they've managed to squeeze this graphically out of the 64. So,
well, especially the colors look pretty close, despite it's a different color palette.
Yeah, and I think the NES had more colors too.
Are you sure about that?
I am fairly certain. Palette of 48 colors and 6 grays.
48. Okay.
And a total of 64 sprites may be displayed on screen at a given time without reloading sprites mid-screen.
Now I hope that somebody is doing international soccer.
So I mean that there, you know, the 64 has 16 colors and 8 sprites, which is not anywhere near, you know, versus the 48 and 6 grays of the Nintendo. And
yeah, I think that that the question mark blocks look quite different on the Commodore 64.
Yeah,
that is the first thing as a difference I've noticed. In the NES version, it's orange, and in the Commodore 64 version, it's yellow. Right. And they look smaller for some reason.
I don't think that they are actually smaller. I think that it looks a little bit different because they do use the multicolor mode on this for the backgrounds for a lot of it. So it's not going to look perfect because the NES had the, you know, regular pixel sizes, whereas this has the fat multicolor pixels.
That is probably the reason why. Yeah.
And I have noticed that it does crash a fair amount on my 64C, which I believe is because of the VSP bug.
Yes, I tried it first with my Aldi C64, and this one doesn't have the bug at all, so it would crash, and within seconds I wouldn't be even able to play it. Mm-hmm. So I had to use another C64 to use it.
Well, no, that's interesting. That's interesting because my 64C has the same revision of motherboard as an Aldi 64 would have. But it took me, the first bunch of times that I tried using it, it would crash it immediately right out of the box, like you said. And then after maybe 5 or 6 different tries, then it would run. And through all my playthroughs of it, it has crashed mid-game once since, but otherwise I haven't had a problem with it at all. Mm-hmm. Mm. And apparently the VSP bug is not something that always. I was looking. There was a tester program that you can get to see if your computer has it, and you're supposed to leave it on for like hours. So,
yeah, I know.
So you could go for hours and hours without having the bug, and then suddenly it pops in. So
I know. Yeah, that is why it's recommended to use the Z64 Reloaded.
Yeah.
Because there is the bug permanently.
Yeah. Or I guess the 128 is okay with it too, because I used that and it didn't have any issue, and it uses the turbo mode. Or not turbo
I didn't
mode,
try the Super CPU yet, and I'm very happy that this software supports the Super CPU natively.
Yeah, that is really that's impressive.
Because people always ask me, what do you use a Super CPU for? And I always say, I'm using it always for test drive, the first version, because it has a frame limiter in it. Mm-hmm. That means it limits the frames it will display. And so that was pretty much forward thinking for 87, that they would put in a frame limit routine just in case somebody would be able to run the 64 faster in the future, which actually happened like 10 years later with the Flash 8 turbo card.
that nobody ever owned.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, there's also always mentioned that Ross Müller didn't really produce a lot of them, and I guess that's the only product Ross Müller is ever mentioned for, and that's the Flash 8 Accelerate card.
Yeah.
But hey, thanks to them, it got us the Super CPU, and that's pretty flawless. And it's interesting because I look at all those videos that were made for Super Mario Bros. And people are always, pulling up their Super CPUs. And I seem to be one of the few people that have the version 2, because most I see videos made from are version 1, because you can see that on the different reset button.
Right.
That's interesting.
The other thing also that this Mario Brothers port supports is 2-button joysticks or gamepads.
Yes, and originally there was only one game that ever supported that, and that was Chase HQ2, because it was shipped with the C64 GS.
So now we got to try to find a 2-button controller.
I have one. I have a GS.
Would a Sega Master System controller work with that?
Well, not without an adapter, because it can kill your SID.
No, that's the Mega Drive or Genesis controller. The original Sega Master System controllers you can use without an adapter.
Ah, right. All right.
I'm wondering if because they have more than one button, but I don't know if those buttons are mapped to anything.
Not that I think so. But actually now there is somebody on eBay that is selling custom-made gamepads with a second button. So there's always a market for something.
Yeah. Well, and we'll put a link in this podcast description to where you can get this new Super Mario Brothers. I can't guarantee you that by the time we release this, that Nintendo will not have swooped down like an eagle from the sky and plucked it from the internet.
Which makes me wonder why it was never put on anything Nintendo wouldn't have access to. GameBase.
Yeah.
Commodore Scene database.
It is
Scene.org.
It is on the CSDB.
Or the original version, or only the Flash version?
The original version.
Okay.
And several cracks.
Yeah, that is what I was after. Okay, so the original version too.
Yeah, so
because he used those limited time downloading services. And
I know.
Okay, that's the best source you can get your stuff hosted on. Not.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, I can understand not wanting to host it on your own site, because again, it's a Nintendo it's not just a Nintendo product, it's pretty much the Nintendo product. And I mean, they're so tight with what they put out and what they let other people do that they're going to be. I'm surprised that they haven't come along yet and tried to.
Because it was Easter.
Yeah. So like I said, we'll put links to this stuff, but I can't guarantee you that they're going to work.
On the C64 TV, actually, I also linked to the cartridge case and label somebody created for this already.
Okay.
So, hey. Easy.
Hey, I got some more new stuff as far as we've covered.
Yeah, you told me about this new SID clone from the Czech Republic.
Yeah, it's so we've got the SID FX, which is uses your regular SIDs, but we've also got the FPGA SID project and the Swin SID and the Swin SID Ultimate and all those other things. Well, there's also the ARM SID, which I just saw, which seems to be pretty.
I hope it doesn't cost an arm and a leg.
It doesn't. It costs 27 euros.
An arm and
yes. I heard it. I was ignoring it.
How much does it cost again?
27 euros.
Okay, not bad.
It's about $30.
Cheap.
Yeah, it's not bad at all.
That is about what the Swin SID Ultimate is costing.
Yeah,
cost.
Yeah, and so you can change it. You can tune the filters. You can. It does the analog inputs for like mice and stuff properly. So
which the other ones do too, but people were failslessly saying it's not.
Right. But there's that is available, and there's also ARM2SID plus FM.
Yeah, I saw that. So you can use the stereo model that you already have, like the ZFX or something, and then map a cable between them and have some kind of emulation going on.
It's OPL FM synthesis.
Yeah.
Which is similar to your the FM YAM or YAM FM or whatever it's called.
YAM FM, exactly.
Yeah. So that's also very interesting. That's not out yet. That is supposed to be end of April 2019, which is right about now. And it's not available yet, so keep everybody informed. I'll put links again to where you can get to these things in the podcast description. So when it is available, it'll be available. And I don't have any pricing information. No. I do have pricing information. I'm sorry. It's 48 to 49 euros for the ARM2SID plus FM, which again, a little over $50 American. So it's not a bad deal.
And you're supporting Europe. It's coming from the Czech Republic.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I mean, we said it already. A lot of good things nowadays, they're coming from Czech Republic, Poland. I've never ordered so much from Poland for my Z64 like I did in the last 3 years. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So Poland and Czech Republic became countries with really good quality products.
Yeah, they are.
The Czech Republic is also known for the IDE 64 controller. Mm-hmm. That's also very, very good.
Yep.
So, hey, can't complain there. Yeah. You know. And we already had the PSU 64 guy, for example. So, yeah, more power to them.
Yeah, very cool.
Well, what else have we got? Okay, so what we didn't mention yet is that the Reshooter soundtrack is available on CD now. And the Scene World podcast is also now available on Google Podcasts. Google Podcasts, unfortunately, is only available in America.
Just in time for this episode, which is podcast number 64.
Nice.
Yeah. And having Rob Hubbard on podcast number 64 is pretty much, I don't think we could have done any better than that. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I got more news.
Okay, sure.
We talked to Thomas Cherryholmes a few podcasts back, and we went over the whole IRATA online system, a piece of PlatoNet service that he runs, and it's been ported to almost every freaking thing known to the human race. He has just acquired it's a military. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a military spec computer, and he has
from Russia.
Yes, from Russia. And he has ported it to that, which is also I think it's a DOS version essentially, but it's a different screen resolution and all that. So it's now on that as well. This guy is just he's a machine. This dude's a machine, just cranking out different versions of this thing. And it's kind of amazing. He just must run on caffeine and. So and finally, before we get on to the rest of it, Crystal Herring has been a friend of the podcast for a number of years now. We had her on in the early days when she was still in the Frag Dolls, and we did a Twitch stream. Was it a Twitch stream?
It was a Twitch live stream for the Frankfurt Film Museum.
That's right. We did that with her again a couple years later.
In 2015.
Right. So we like her a lot, and she's been around for a bit. Her mom has been diagnosed with cancer, which is very uncool. And they're running a GoFundMe.
Exactly.
To help cover some of the expenses of care for the care that is required. So we encourage everyone to go and contribute something to that. You know, a lot of times we're running Kickstarters for games and stuff like that. That's going on. And games are games. It's fun. It's cool. You know, if it could mean something to you. But this is like an actual. It's more important than funding a game, essentially.
Which still surprises me how often it happens. I mean, look at Captain Crunch, that had several GoFundMe raisers and stuff.
Right. So we'll put a link to that in the podcast description. We encourage everyone to go, and even if it's, you know, $1 or $2, something to help out would be awesome.
I guess every penny counts.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. One other bit we got is our own awesome Nick Vivid, who we love to death, and is probably one of the better coders that I know on the 64.
Strike term modem.
No, the Strike Link modem, Strike Term, the new version of CCGMS, which uses like the REU for the buffer and all that stuff. He's also got a version of Unzip, and it works with the SD to IEC and partitions. So there's a lot of different stuff that he's done, which is kind of amazing.
And he did our NTSC fixed voodoo noter in 2002.
Yes.
That's actually how we got him, because he was like, okay, you need an NTSC fixed voodoo noter. Here you have it.
Right. So awesome guy. He's got a new album coming out. Album is called Blissed Out. The release, I believe, is May 17th. So that's a bit away, a month or so. But from everything I've seen, it's his normal awesomeness. So, again, links to everything.
His last album on tape was brilliant. Orange tape. Had to get it.
Yeah. Yes. So, links to all this in the description below. Everybody check it out.
I bought a Walkman just because of him.
Nice. So anyway, yeah, so Rob Hubbard and Chris Abbott are right there. Why don't we go talk to them?
Yep.
I'm gonna go get you guys some coffee. I'll be right back. Start without me.
Okay. All right. So today we will be talking to Rob Hubbard and Chris Abbott about the 8-bit Symphony that will actually happen in UK in June. So
yeah, that's correct.
Let's start a bit about how did that start to happen. Maybe let's start first from Rob's perspective. How did that start to happen?
Well, I did a small project for Hull College, which was called Go Go Dash, and it was basically me coming out of retirement, so to speak, to do that job. And Chris was involved with Hull College, talking to a guy called Graham, and they talked about the possibility of getting Hull College involved with the Hull Philharmonic to do a concert. Of course, we never thought it was really going to happen, and then things started moving, and before we knew it, Hull College had booked the City Hall for the 15th of June, and that started the ball rolling, because once they booked the venue, then we had to knuckle down and get everything else organised.
So, how was it for you, Chris?
This is something I've been trying to put into action ever since I heard Rob's Kentilla arrangement back in around 98, 99. And then tried to get some orchestral stuff onto Back in Time 2. Did that with Forbidden Forest and Aztec Challenge. Then Rob did versions of his stuff, War and Kentilla, again for Back in Time 3. There were attempts to get it going over the years. It started, it stopped. It was in France. It was in Germany. It was nowhere. But there was always that problem of you're not seeing the ticket money to pay for the stuff until you've done the concert and paid for the stuff. And the whole college thing, when that came up, we'd already been working on the orchestral angle properly for 2 years since the Kickstarter, so there was already a lot of material there, some from Rob, some from other people. And the whole college thing came just at the right time, when we had enough material to be able to prove that this wasn't just pie in the sky, that there was some actual stuff going on. As it turns out, there's a lot more steps after that in terms to get the scores to the orchestra in a playable sense, and Rob's had a huge hand in that because he's musical director and has taken a hand on all the scores as well as his own. And that's where we're at the moment. So it took maybe 20 years, and it took a combination of circumstances and a lot of hard work to get to this point.
The Kickstarter you mentioned that we also spoke earlier about in a previous show, that was Project Hubbard?
No, this was an earlier one, Back in Time Symphonic Collection.
Okay.
The idea behind that was simply to generate the money to get the scores done for a concert. We didn't know what concert. I just knew that if we had the scores, we would be able, in a much better position, to be able to get to do a concert, because you can't book the concert and then have no scores, especially if you're starting from zero. And you can't do a Kickstarter for just scores, because there's not enough people interested in scores. So we sold a CD of mock-ups, which we spent 3 years doing and thrown thousands of pounds of libraries and a heck of a lot of man hours at, which are now sounding really, really good, so that to the uneducated, to most people it would sound like a real orchestra. Only people like Rob and orchestral people would be able to tell it wasn't, because of the lack of certain things like tempo changes or mistakes even.
I see. Interesting. And in the press announcement, you actually write you had a dream to do something like that for 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, you can't help listen to something like Ken Taylor or Trap and not think that it was originally meant to be orchestral. You can't. It just sounds like it's the same with Spellbound. It's like it just was meant to be. There were quite a few Commodore 64 tunes that were like that. There's quite a few that weren't. There's quite a few that they just come, they do a bass line, they do a melody, and they go away. But people like Rob and Ben were writing bigger than the chip in terms of musical ideas.
Yeah, I remember, Rob, in our last interview you mentioned you had like different versions. You had the original I would say Symphony version, and then you had like broken down for every sound chip and computer a different version, right?
In some respects, yeah, that's true. If I did like a SID version, then I had to often scale it down to do the AY chip version. But some of these things were kind of more in the concept, or the initial idea might have been orchestrally driven, because of the fact that I was listening to so much film music at the time, which of course during the 80s was really a big orchestral scores. So I was heavily influenced by that, and trying to learn about the craft of how those guys wrote that kind of music. That filtered down into some of the stuff that I was trying to do, even with the limitations of the C64.
Who are your favorite film composers at the time?
Well, obviously, John Williams is right up there, along with James Horner, and then Jerry Goldsmith. There's a whole host of those guys that are just fabulous musicians, fabulous composers, who know their craft inside out.
In the stuff you've done for 8-Bit Symphony, are there any bits where you've been trying to capture the essence of a particular composer or time period?
Well, obviously, I've listened to an awful lot of John Williams, and some of that's going to, whether you like it or not, is going to kind of sift through is trying to come through. I had an interesting talk with a friend of mine, and who's heard me play some jazz stuff, and I told him about, here's some great albums that I listen to, and the first thing he said was that I can hear the influence of what you'll be listening to in your playing. So no matter what you listen to, it's going to get absorbed into your, memory banks and deep psyche somewhere, and at some point, whether you like it or not, it's going to emerge and come through in some form or another. So, I mean, I wouldn't say that I, deliberately try to, sound like somebody, but I think that it's inevitable that your influence is going to come through. I played the updated Monty I give a version to Barry Leach, and the first thing he said was, you've been listening to Prokofiev, which I thought was very insightful, but, a wonderful comment that made me feel, pretty good.
I mean, I can't pretend that there were two of Rob's pieces which I kind of started and then Rob took and made his own, and one of them was Monty on the Run High Score, which I started off as basically a rip-off of Leia's theme, and Rob took it and ripped out all the derivative stuff and went right back to, I think, to the 19th century, where John Williams had got his inspirations from for that. I think Rob called it a 19th century romantic piece.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, with that piece, it was a lot of it is it's a case of, well, you're trying to aim for key changes, because you did a key change really early on that I thought was real nice, and so throughout later on in the piece, I wanted to try to get instruments in their best register, and so then you're thinking about, well, to get them in a certain register, I need to get it into this key, and so then you're thinking, how do I get from A to B, as it were, to get it into the new key and work out some kind of logical progression so that when you hit the key change, it has a big lift to it. I think that Monty Commando High Score should be a highlight, I think.
It really will. I mean, when it comes off the quiet bit and does the whole, comes back in for the grand romantic flourish. It's quite a moment. There's a real wow in there for people I've played it to, and it will soften people up emotionally for Trap and Fire Lord and the big. Plus,
the other thing is it will provide, a lot of the other stuff is much more upbeat, and that will provide a nice contrast. So it will kind of take things down a few notches for a little while.
Definitely, and give the all the brass apart from the horns a rest. Because when I looked at the score, I noticed there's nothing in there but the horns, which is
there's only French horns, which is the brass arrest. Unfortunately, the French horns throughout most of the pieces have a pretty hard time. As to the poor viola players, they don't get much rest. I mean, you still try to give some people rests when you can.
I noticed in Monty on the Run High Score that there's a bit where it sounds like there's a trumpet, but it's actually the violas. Was that purposeful?
I'd have to have a. I don't know if it was purposeful, but I'd have to have a look to see which bar it was.
The violas are playing quite high, so it sounds a bit like a trumpet descant, but it isn't.
Yeah.
It's very good anyway. I was very impressed.
Actually, talking about symphonies, it's not the first project of a kind you did. I mean, for example, it's 12 years ago that you did Run 10 with Jeroen Tel before, and that was also a Z64 orchestra project, and it also included Commando
as we spoke about right now, and also international karate. I wonder if you took anything from your experience with the Run 10 orchestra from back in the days and said, okay, I will improve there and make some things different for the 8-bit symphony.
Well, the problem with the whole Run 10 thing was the fact that it was more like a kind of a chamber music ensemble.
Okay.
And, maybe it was a bit over-ambitious on my part with the way I tried to orchestrate stuff for, 2 violins, a viola, cello, and a double bass, 2 horns, 1 trumpet, 1 trombone, 1 flute, 1 oboe, and 1 clarinet. So everything sounded like very thin because there just wasn't enough instruments to try to do it justice. But
I used the word polite. It sounded polite.
Yeah, it just, a lot of it just didn't, it never kind of quite worked as well as it should have done.
Okay, well, I have to admit I'm not a musical symphony expert. For me, it sounded amazing. But I guess I have other values than you guys who are deep into music.
It provided a lot of raw material for this. It gave us a starting point for.
The Run 10, the middle bit of commando, basically I lifted that out of there to use in the 8-bit orchestra, and then I kind of reorchestrated some of it. But the basic material was straight out of the Run 10 commando high score part.
Yeah.
The Monty on the Run was completely rewritten.
Yeah, when I started it, it was basically a rip-off of Sabre Dance and William Tell, and Rob liked it, but he didn't. I don't think he wanted his key iconic piece to be a cheap Ray knockoff of other composers. So he.
The problem was that it was, I thought that the rip-off was just a little too close at times,
Yeah.
I thought,
so it was a first-rate rip-off. Yes.
That's always a problem when you're trying to rip something off. Is that you walk this thin line between trying to rip it off so that somebody says, "Oh, that sounds a bit like that," and then you cross that line and hang on, you've ripped it off too much,
Although I listened to the score version of Monty on the Run, and that actually, once it gets going, it does the same thing, Sabre Dance wise.
Yeah.
So I wasn't even original with my unoriginality.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a lot better now. I'm very pleased about how the quiet original section of music has gone down with listeners, because I was worried that it was a bit far but in context and with the proper rendering, it seems to be going down very well. And so it's the very Return of the Jedi vibe about some of it, Ewok forests and whatever in that section.
Yeah, Monty on the Ewoks.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we're going to have to find it. If it wasn't for Lucasfilm looking at everything with a copyright eye, we'd probably do a skit on that. But that's one of the things with the videos for the concert is it's very easy to try and be funny, and it's very bad to try and be funny, because we want the music to be taken seriously as an emotional experience. So I've had to tone down my natural tendency to be clever or witty. And
you don't know what the timing is going to be like, though, do you?
No, that's also true. I mean, we have to just put some padding on the end, and I mean, if it ends like 10 seconds early or something, people aren't going to mind. It's not being recorded. People get the experience out of it. If we ever really, I don't think you'd ever do that thing with a click track. It would just ruin everything. So you just live with the uncertainty and put padding in. Yeah,
if you had the Hollywood Orchestra, you could do it with a click track.
Yeah,
it would still sound fantastic, because those guys are, the A-grade players.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of it going on now with trance and stuff, but yeah, for our purposes, we've got to. It's difficult enough for them to play the music without the added distraction of having to synchronize to something.
Oh yeah.
Apart from the conductor, so yeah.
Yeah. Plus the fact you need individual mixes and monitors and headphone mixes for individual sections and players and.
Yeah, that's the thing. Because this is such a low budget thing. I mean, we're lucky to be doing it at all. That everyone's been so generous with their time getting this up and running, and because we want it to happen, and we want it to happen well, and that means keeping it as simple as possible. An orchestra, a stage, a venue, and some stuff projected onto a screen.
Yeah.
As you said, low budget project. What would you normally spend on such a kind of project?
Oh, bloody hell. If you counted up the hours it would be like hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Okay.
As it is, everyone is pulling together and making something happen because they love the art. And once you've got a series of scores, which is what we're working towards, then you've then got a series of things that can fit much more sensibly into a professional concert equation, because then you've done that, you've got those scores, then you've just got the venue, the orchestra, any extras, and you can do it. It's baby steps. So we've got to the point now where we've got 17 fabulous scores that are almost little bugs here and there, but basically there. All we need to do now is get them printed and distributed, and the PDFs have already gone to the players, so it's all in progress.
Have we got the funding from Hull College sorted out on that issue?
They've promised to do it. I've been sticking myself in the middle between Northwold's printers, Robin, Matthew, and Graham because the printer thought they'd submitted enough information, but they hadn't. So I pulled in and said, look, you've got to do a detailed quote, blah, 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 blah. Get it to Matthew because he's got to tick the relevant boxes to get the procurement process underway. And that's all in process now. I'm keeping an eye on that. If there is a point at which someone has to step in and say, okay, right, I'll pay the printer and then claim the money back later, then we'll have to do that. I have to pass the hat round. It's about 3,100 now, which is more. We thought it was going to be 4.5k, so 3.1 is a reasonably pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
Considering the original estimate was 600.
But if Hull College had committed to that, they should honour their commitment.
They should, but they were given a bit of a bum steer on the scale. But they have. They are committing to it. Yes. I mean, it's not the question of them saying no. It's the question of being able to get the procurement through all the systems in time for the deadline. There may need to be a cheat where it needs to be paid up. It's all to do with logistics and procurement as opposed to the theory. Yeah. But I'm on it. I'm not going to let me and Graham aren't going to let the concerts go ahead without scores.
Okay.
How was it for you, Rob, seeing that you did run 10 before? Was it this time easier to make another project similar to that? I guess the first round back then you had to work with the Arontel, and now you are, only focusing on your own music. How was that for you, Rob?
It's a lot easier to focus on your own stuff than it is to work with somebody else's stuff, because with your own stuff, I mean, I can take whatever liberties I want, and I can go off in whatever direction I want. I can change things that I'm not happy with the original, and swap and change it, and invert things and play it backwards and do all sorts of crazy stuff. Because I've only got myself to please with it, really, and the buck stops with me. But if you're working with other people's music, then you tend to be a a lot more cautious, and you can't really take so many liberties. I mean, I see that when people are doing some of my own arrangements, like I heard recently the Fast Loaders guys did the Commando High Score.
Oh, yes.
And the first thing I thought of was, why on earth didn't you put a harmony guitar line in there? It's crying out for it, but they didn't do it because, you know, the original didn't have it. And so maybe they thought that they wanted to stick more to the original. But, you know, if I'd have been involved with that, the first thing I would have said was, you've got to put a harmony guitar line on there, because it's just basically screaming out for one. And then the other difference between doing the Run 10 and the 8-bit is that when I did the Run 10, the only thing I had really to give any kind of rendition was general MIDI. And with the 8-bit Symphony, I've been working with Sibelius and this magic program called Note Performer, which does a real good job of rendering orchestral instruments. So you get a much better feedback loop about what you're doing. And you enter a new way of doing things, because while you're being creative and coming up with ideas, you're also thinking about and doing the orchestration at the same time, rather than writing a musical idea and then thinking about at a later stage how you're going to orchestrate something. So it seems to me to be a much better way of working with the Sibelius and the Note Performer.
Okay, so this is just how technology progressed compared to 2007?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I mean, I was using Finale, back 12 years ago, whenever it was. I was using Finale, which was a pretty good notation program, but it didn't have any kind of rendering to be able to hear what you're doing, and so I had to keep mocking things up with general MIDI or my trusty old Roland synthesizer, and it's not such a good way of doing things compared to what you've got now.
Quick question, Rob. When you were when IK was played in Leipzig in 2005, 2007, how surprised were you at when the first rehearsal happened, and the sound that was? How different was the sound at the rehearsal to what was in your head when you were doing the score? Because you wouldn't have heard it at all orchestrally before that moment.
No, I didn't. No, I thought the Prague Orchestra, to be honest, were really, really good players, and it sounded much, much better than what I anticipated, especially that slow section. The more kind of, when it slows down to, what's it, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through the tune, it slows right down. There was a couple of surprises, like the piccolo was too high and that took your head off, and I had to take that down the octave. And one of the flute passages they thought was a bit difficult, which was the guy asked if he could play it on the piccolo, but the brass sounded fantastic, and it was generally much better than I thought it was going to be. Plus the fact when I heard it in the theatre, what was it called, the Gewandhaus or something? That place is designed for an orchestra. It's just the acoustics, and the sound was just amazing.
It's a pity no recording exists, but it doesn't.
Oh.
I don't think smartphones were capable of it then.
No, they weren't, no. No, we were still stuck with the old, what was that, Nokia something or other.
Yeah.
people were playing Snake, and that was about the size of it.
That's actually true. So, when you listen to renditions of your own stuff played by Symphony, you sometimes had moments where you thought maybe, hope nobody minds that it doesn't sound right?
There's two aspects. Some people do like symphonic mock-ups, which is using VSTs, and then other people have tried actually to do, just small sections with a live orchestra. And the two are really quite different.
In something like this, and because it's Rob, as Rob said, he has a lot of leeway to change what the piece does. Sometimes because the original piece just wouldn't work as an orchestral piece anyway. It's the wrong structure or whatever, but there's lots in there to work with. And the fans are generally, I think, very forgiving on that. Even when someone else does it, everyone knows that the jump from SID to orchestra is a huge jump, and so big changes usually have to happen unless it was actually self-evident what the composer meant originally. There's always choices, and all the people who have heard the mock-ups and whatever so far have been very, very enthusiastic about them, especially as there's the sounds, the number of as the quality of the library rendering goes up. So I think that it's going to be very special for people, even if it's something like Fire Lord, for instance. It bears only about 50% resemblance to what Ben originally wrote, but people have fallen in love with it before, and it's going to be amazing when it's done live. So the last few tracks of the concert are just like, it's just mind-blowing how much there is in that. You've got Ben's big opuses, you've got Rob's Monty just before as the finale track, just before Stiff Lip, and Monty on the Run getting people in a good mood for it as a breather before the kind of emotional turmoil. It's all about telling an emotional story. I was telling it wrong because Rob corrected me on the order of the tracks. Because I was trying to put all Ben's tracks, including Last Ninja, all together as a tribute to Ben. But Rob was right that Last Ninja wasn't right as a end of concert thing. It was correct as a kind of after the interval when everyone's got settled down thing. It's moving, but it's not a big wow flashbang thing like Monty on the Run or Fire Lord.
Yeah.
So Last Ninja is kind of also not a very, you would say, slow piece. It's more like more a pushing kind of music piece.
Well, it's been scored slow because we've got the Wastelands loader, and that is slow.
Okay. And
Wasteland has been scored to get rid of a little bit of the rinky-dinkiness that was inherent in the original. So it's more like dum-dum, dum-dum, as opposed to dum-dum, dum-dum. So it's kind of trying to bring out the epic, as opposed to a previous version of Last Ninja I heard that was done as part of the play concerts had a shaker in it going, and oh no, don't do that, please. It just kind of trivialized it for me, and there's definitely a place the shakers should be, but Last Ninja Wastelands isn't one of them.
So that means actually there will also be some Ben Daglish tunes in the orchestra.
Oh yeah, there's William Wobbler, which is so much fun. I'm a bit worried about whether the horn players are going to have trouble with the jazz timing, but it'll work out. Trap, which is a big space epic. Fire Lord, big piratey adventure, and
Ninja.
And Last Ninja, which is it was originally 12 minutes and now it's 5, so we had to really cut it down.
Okay, interesting.
Well, we're running out of time. We're already over time. They've been very generous with us, considering how little rehearsal time there actually is in context.
Well, I would have added Deflector to the list, I have to admit.
I don't know if that's a proper orchestral tune, though.
I know, that is why I mentioned it.
I don't think you could better what Sid 80s did with it, unless you had it like Sid 80s with an orchestra. But then you're in an entirely different.
Oh, as I said, I'm not a musical expert. I can see how a tune can be not fitting for an orchestra. But I like interesting experiments, I have to admit. So.
It is interesting. The difficulty there are some things that when you put them into an orchestral score, they just sound like something that has been put into an orchestral score because someone wanted to put it into an orchestral score, not because the music was crying out. I mean, there's at least one piece in this concert which is there, not so much because it's a natural orchestral piece, but because it's a popular piece everyone wanted to hear. But
which one's that?
Ghosts and Goblins.
Oh.
But it has the way it's been done. It has a lot of drama and melodrama. In fact, it's comic and it worked really well. And Mark did his own arrangement, which took it about 75% of the way. I tried to take it 25% of the way. That got wound back by Ali, our orchestrator, and then they took it 100% of the way, and then Robin did the rest. So lots and lots of hands on the piece, and all necessary. And what's come out is a hugely catchy, very entertaining piece. But you would not necessarily there was a lot of work to do to get over the fact that musically it's catchy, but it doesn't go many places. It's got to.
Well, we have mentioned Last Ninja, and actually the special thing about Last Ninja is that it's not only Ben Daglish, but also Anthony Lees, who were contributing to the music for the C64. So you actually have to be careful to have both of the influences in the orchestra version, I guess.
Well, not really. I mean, it was Ben's Wastelands and Ben's Wastelands Loader. There's not a lot. I would have liked to have the Palace or something like that in there from Anthony, but there's so little time when you consider the wealth of material there is. I mean, the symphonic Kickstarter was 3 albums. That's like 240 minutes. I mean, the concert is 90 to 95 minutes. So, we've got like stuff literally fighting to get in.
Well, that means you have to make a successor symphony someday.
Well, yeah. If Hull works and is widely considered a success and Hull College break even, and it's proof that there's an emotional hunger for this, then there's lots of places this can go. I mean, the big screen. We're not DVD recording it, but if you took the big screen video we were showing and put the top quality mock-ups on it, what you have is a version of the show that can be portable. We can send it to Australia, we can send it to America, send it to Germany, put it in a cinema, play it loud, play it at retro shows like Retro Expo or Retro Revival or the Cambridge Museum or Retro Computer Museum, and you've got a lot of ways people can enjoy the 8-Bit Symphony concert. Not quite in the way people enjoy it in the concert hall because there's a live orchestra and there's nothing like that, but in a way that they can get the flavour and experience the emotional flow.
You mentioned fast loaders, Rob, and I find it interesting. So you actually keep an eye on what other people are doing with your music when they bring it to stage and perform it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, I'm not aware of everything that goes on, but a few things I come across. So I'm aware of the Fast Loaders album. And I think I've got the track somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I find it interesting that you are so restless and still going on and making projects with people like Chris Abbott. I think that's great because, a lot of composers from the old days are a bit with the attitude like, who is still interested in that stuff that I did like 30, 40 years ago? So it's so great to see how enthusiastic you are and how much you keep on the ball with what happens to your tunes.
I did a talk in Helsinki at some assembly thing, and during that talk, I said that if you're a musician, then it tends to be in your blood, and you can't get rid of it. No matter, it's hard to not be a musician, and there's, you still spend hours like listening to music and practicing and playing, and it's always there. You're always going to try and find some kind of outlet for your music and your creativity. So if you get a chance to write for an orchestra, which is basically the kind of height of what you can achieve in some ways, apart from being a conductor, which is the absolute top of the profession. But if you get a chance to write for an orchestra, you're going to jump in with both feet, because it's such a rare opportunity that most people would give the right arm for. Well, not the right arm, maybe the right leg.
Anything that didn't need to hold a baton, yeah.
Yeah, So so you're gonna go for it basically with 100% of effort, because it's such a rare thing to be able to try to write for an orchestra, and it's such an interesting thing. It's not like writing, for a small jazz ensemble or something. To write for a real orchestra, you've got to get into a certain way of thinking, different mindset, and the challenge is just you can't resist the challenge. It's I can't think of the word. You cannot pass up that opportunity, is what I'm saying.
That's one of the reasons I pushed so hard on the project was because I knew that Rob was so interested in the orchestral experience, and as more than me, and would really relish the challenge of getting involved in something like this, especially where in previous experiences of this there were kind of a lot of limitations, either in terms of like the orchestra type, like Run 10, or in terms of limitations caused by being at the bottom of the food chain, relatively speaking, orchestrally speaking, because there's such a hierarchy. And it was what was good in this one was that Rob was working with the orchestra in a much more nourishing and supportive way than in previous projects. So they took him on, he took them on. It's all good, and that was an important part of it.
Yeah, the relationship that we have with Robin has been really good as well. And the feedback that we've been getting from Robin, who's the conductor, has been really good. Along with the other people that I've met on the project, like Graham and Bob from the Hull Phil.
And Ali.
And Ali, yeah.
I wonder how it is for the players themselves. Video game music, despite it is a genre nowadays that is getting more known, because when I was a child 30 years ago, my mother would say it was beep plop music. How was it? Did the players have to be introduced to video game music, and what you expect from them, how to play the instruments?
Well, the origin isn't relevant, really, not anymore. The music is orchestral music, full stop. It sounds like 80s film soundtracks. They're not going in there having to find new ways of playing the violin to make a Mario sound. Although I remember there's a YouTube video out where he did exactly that, and that was very clever. But this is the thing. It's not chip music anymore, except in terms of where it originated. It is symphonic music. Anyone could enjoy this if their mind was open enough to come, and it is melodic and exciting and tuneful and emotional, and it's all those things. And the fact that the people there already know the tunes that gives a very important extra layer of connection with the piece. So you don't have to work for that. That comes with the rations. But if you put say Monty on the Run high score commando, I call it Monty's Journey, frankly, but you put that in any concert and people will enjoy it, whether they're 70 or 15, because it just reminds them of all sorts of other nostalgic things, things they've come into contact with, the cinema or whatever. So if people allow themselves to come, they'll have a big emotional journey. And if people come because they don't like chip music, well, what are they thinking? We're not playing chip music. Well, okay, I might put a quarter of an hour of chip music at the beginning of classical covers, just as a bit of fun. But it's not chip music. It doesn't sound like chip music. There are no Commodore 64s on stage. Anyone who comes thinking their ears are going to be torn off is wrong.
The only thing I would say to the original question was that I think there are a certain number of people who like classical music who would immediately think that this is not highbrow enough. They're stuck in, traditions of 19th century literature, classical literature, and not particularly into 20th century film music or whatever. And I think maybe that might apply to some of the players in the orchestra as well, who might not be too keen because they've got the blinkers on with certain periods of classical music.
Okay. I guess the target group, however, is the people that played the games and enjoyed the music from the games, I guess. I guess that's basically the target group, even though you say it doesn't matter if the person is younger and was not part of that era, or is 70 and wasn't really a gamer back in the day. Finally, I guess the main audience will be people who remember the music from the old 8-bit computers.
I think that's true, but I think also something that's strange that's been happening is that there's a younger generation of people who are suddenly into like 8-bit games, who are aware of things like Commando and all sorts of other people who are into like chip music and will know some of the music from what they think of as chip tunes, who might be interested in the concert. So I think it's not just the old-fashioned guys from the 80s who played the games.
Interesting, yes. That reminds me of a story that Dave Lowe told me once, who is also a British composer, and he said he was once in the subway and then he heard the ringtone of a 20-something guy, and that was Darklighter too. And
Yeah.
So I guess such things really happen because now that retro music, retro gaming is hip again, that the generation jump is happening, and suddenly even younger people discovering the old games and of course also the music that come with it.
Some of these guys who were around playing games in the 80s are now grown up, and they have offsprings who are suddenly finding interest in this stuff as well.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. So that's also something you discovered yourself. That's pretty cool. So from all the pieces that will be played on the orchestra, what is the one that you are the most looking forward to?
That's an interesting question.
Thank you. I try.
You'll have to give him two, one of his and one of everyone else's.
Well, of course.
there's actually a lot of good pieces there, like the Aztec Challenge is a terrific piece. Stiff Lip is a terrific piece. And Wobbler's a terrific piece. There's a lot of the stuff is really, really good. Is really good. I suppose one of the things that I would like to come off well, I think, is the flash, because I think it's a hell of an arrangement. It was originally Chris's arrangement. He takes a lot of credit for the flash, and I just kind of reworked a lot of it and orchestrated and added bits, lots of other bits to it.
Save the life of the cello players.
Yeah. If that comes off really well, then I'll be pretty pleased. Because I think it's a terrific piece. I don't know how well people will know it, but I think it's a great arrangement. I've heard it like approximately 26 million times, so I know it pretty well.
Of course, as you prepare for the orchestra, you probably have a lot of rehearsals and heard different pieces over and over again to make sure it will sound right.
Well, the rehearsals start on the 15th of May, so we only have basically a month. There's only about, 6 or 7 rehearsals before the concert.
Wow, that must be...
a bit worrying, I would say so, yeah.
I would say nervous, but okay.
Yeah, okay, a bit nervous, yeah.
If it was the LSO, they'd be on 3 with maybe 2. So that's how good professional orchestras are.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess.
I think there's a rehearsal on the Friday, and there's a dress rehearsal on the afternoon of the 15th as well.
Yeah. The Friday rehearsals at the hall.
Yeah.
Okay, so the rehearsals are the next big step that's coming forward, actually.
We've got the PDFs of the parts, and the PDFs have been given to the players. I don't know how many of them have actually got the individual PDFs of their parts and to look at. Some of the stuff's like fairly easy, and some of the stuff is quite difficult. I think a lot of it is down to how well they can get to know the pieces and the different sections, and before they start the rehearsals. Depends how enthusiastic they are to keep listening to the pieces to get to know them.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose the other thing about musicians is they're very, very proud people, aren't they?
Yeah.
Musicians don't want to look bad in any way whatsoever. I mean, you never turn up for a gig and think, oh, this is a shit gig, I'm only going to give 20% effort. No matter what the gig is, you always give it your absolute best, don't you? They're very proud because they don't want to come away looking like they haven't absolutely tried their best to play the balls out of everything,
And the audience will give them an ample reward for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they're going to go nuts, the audience.
Yeah,
They'll have never had an audience like it.
Yeah. I mean, I've been to a few of the classical concerts with the Hull Phil, and they've gone down very well, and the playing's been good. The audience have really lapped it up, and there's been massive reception at the end with people stomping and clapping and things like that.
No one makes more noise than 1,000 geeks.
Yeah. Last time I looked at the tickets, it doesn't seem to have moved very much over the last few weeks.
It's got a mid-Kickstarter feel to it.
But when I looked at the last concert, they hadn't sold many tickets. But when I went to the concert, it was pretty full.
I think that I think people in this world, you see it in Kickstarters, people in this world are either last minute or very well prepared, but hardly ever in between. Kickstarters have a good 3 days, then it drifts down, then you try to survive for 3 weeks, and then at the end it kicks up. And what with all the BBC publicity and the extra publicity on the ground in Hull and the groundwork we're doing now, and the new videos coming online, the new renders, I think it'll definitely be an upturn. And it's already over half full, and assuming we sold no more tickets, that would still generate a fair amount of noise. So
I guess you still have 2 months to go, so it's all good, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of work to do, but...
You also mentioned in your press release that there will be a lot of video game industry legends to be present. You wrote over 100 legends will be there.
Well,
any name dropping, maybe?
Well, they're still trying to get Chris Hulsbeck over. Rob's there. Paul Norman. Mark Cooks is trying to make it. It's got a family thing. John Hare. Dave Lowe. Archie McLean, I think, but we've still got to confirm that. And a lot of Amiga faces. Andrew Barnabas. There's a whole Amiga section in the balcony.
I'm really glad to hear that Dave Lowe will be in it too. I guess there are a lot of industry legends that never got really much attention until the last couple of years, where they suddenly popped up in a way.
Well, Dave's been recently in Abbey Road recording stuff for his Kickstarter, recording the Elite Frontier theme. So he's very big on orchestras too. So he was really, really keen to come along and sample it. Another person coming is Graham Jarvis. His name won't be familiar, but he did the Wizardry and Fairlight tunes, and he also, after that, he became the composer for the BBC. So he does Strictly, and he did some things, and Only Fools and Horses, and a lot of other stuff for the Beeb. So he's coming along. He's a Grimsby chap. So
is he?
Yeah, he doesn't live there now, but that's his stomping ground. So he was very pleased to come up and give it a listen. He's very excited about it. Wizardry will hopefully be in the next concert, so that's nice.
Oh, Wizardry, yes, from Miss Romero, right?
From Edge. The Wizardry was the 1985 one.
I thought Wizardry, wasn't that old role-playing game from the early 80s, late 70s, or am I mistaken?
No, No, this was another one. This was kind of a 3D isometric thing which scrolled.
But it has the same name.
Yeah, apparently.
So, anything else planned that people should know for these symphony orchestra?
They should just buy tickets. Give themselves a treat.
Where are actually people able to buy the tickets? Where can find people more information about this?
Hulltheatres.co.uk is where they would go for the box office. That's hulltheatres.co.uk. Hulltheatres.co.uk. And the event itself has a website of 8-bit-symphony.com.
Okay. And what are the prices for the tickets?
The cheapest ones, I'm not sure whether there's still any left, at £15. They go up. The main ones on the main floor are £30. Students get a discount. The balcony, the gallery is £35. So it's pretty affordable.
And Rob will be there, so that's a reason too.
Absolutely.
I think I'll be there. Yeah, unless I drop dead.
Oh no! Hopefully not. No.
Even then, his ghost would be playing the xylophone. So.
Yeah.
So you said, Rob, during the interview that this is one of the biggest things you can do as a musician. Is there anything else that you want to do next? Is there a next big thing after this orchestra?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think you can really do anything better than writing for an orchestra.
Except more orchestra.
I don't think you can really do much beyond that, apart from do more and get better at it.
Well, there are more possibilities. There's 8-Bit Symphony 2 if we could get that going, and also doing proper recordings of the scores for this 8-Bit Symphony if we can fund it. So there's a lot of there's a lot of paths forward from here.
Yeah.
But they all require for Hull to be visibly a success and to prove that there's actually a proper demand for it. Otherwise, we'll enjoy it whatever happens, and the audience will enjoy it whatever happens. But it's we need people to get off their couch and go and treat themselves to some lovely stuff.
It's interesting. So in your head, you are already planning for the next projects. If this one thing is going to be a major success.
Well, yeah, I think partly it's because it would be a shame to have spent all this time on something that was only used once and then never heard of again. It deserves a lot better than that.
If we get realistic costs for recording in Prague or something.
Yeah, or Macedonia is an option as well.
Then you've got the scores. All you need to do is just figure out how much it's going to cost to pay the orchestra and the recording. Yeah,
it's a couple of 2 or 3 weeks, I think, probably. I bet. Yeah, we need to run the scores by someone and get the. But there's someone that Fames do that themselves. We can just send them the scores and then they'll price it up. That covers the whole package from flying out to Macedonia, the hotels, and the appropriate technical people in the studio. And they use a pretty good orchestra that's done some heavy duty stuff. So if we didn't get to Prague, that would be a very cost effective alternative.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess this would be all from my side. I'm very happy that you two took the time to talk to me about this. This is a very interesting thing, and I really hope it will be as successful as you hope it would be. It simply must be. It's such a wonderful thing.
Well, here's hoping we get it to Cologne. Then you can come.
Oh yes, Cologne? I would definitely go. And as you mentioned, maybe making a recording played on an event or something. Why not Gamescom? Gamescom is the biggest video game event in the world right now. The biggest fair for that.
If they give us an orchestra, we can give them some scores, that's for sure. Or we can just give them the DVD if they're feeling cheap, and then they can just play it on a big screen. So,
yeah, why not?
Lots of options.
Interesting. So this will not be the last time we hear from you, Rob.
Probably not.
He hopes not.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, thanks for taking the time, guys. And I'm looking forward to see the updates and, of course, to see the final recording, because unfortunately I can't make it into this event, but I'm sure everybody who will be present will enjoy it a lot.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
guys.
Thanks, Joerg.
So, thank you, guys, and have a nice evening, right?
And you.
Yeah, bye.
See you. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye, Rob.
Hey guys, I got some espressos. Man, the line was great. Oh, jeez. So that was Rob Hubbard and Chris Abbott. To find out more about what they're doing with the 8-Bit Symphony, you can go check out their website, www.8-bit-symphony.com. And you can buy tickets at the Hull Theatre box office over at hulltheatres.co.uk. And that's hulltheatres.co.uk. Thanks to Rob and Chris for hanging out for our 64th episode, making it an awesome one. You know where to find us, sceneworld.org. You're probably already there because you're listening to us. And again, links to everything we've talked about today will be in the podcast description below. Until next time, see ya.